She was only a child, the daughter of a man who had everything: wealth, power, and status. But one day, neighbors saw her standing on a doorstep, begging for scraps of food. Not from a family friend, not from a stranger, but from the black maid her father once dismissed without a second thought. How did the daughter of a billionaire end up desperate and humiliated? And what her father discovered next didn't just shatter his pride, it exposed a truth far darker than he ever imagined. For years, Charles lived in a world built on luxury. A self-made billionaire, he believed money could shield his family from every struggle. His mansion stood high above the town, with iron gates and guards that kept the outside world at a distance. To him, life was measured in deals closed and fortunes gained, while his young daughter grew up surrounded by everything she could ever want. But behind the grand walls, cracks were already forming. Charles had once employed a black maid, hard-working, devoted, and quiet. She cared for his daughter when he was too busy, often becoming the comfort the child longed for. Yet Charles, proud and dismissive, never valued her presence. He let her go without a second thought, certain she was replaceable. To the world, his life seemed untouchable. Success, family, security, it was all there. But change doesn't announce itself with warning. It creeps in, subtle at first, until one moment tears the illusion apart, because on one ordinary afternoon, as Charles returned home expecting the same picture of comfort and control, he would see something that shattered every belief he had about power, privilege, and the people he thought were beneath him. Charles's return should have been triumphant. He had just closed another deal, another victory that would remind the world of his success. But as his car rolled into the driveway, he noticed something unusual. His daughter wasn't in her room, wasn't with the nanny, wasn't even inside the house. The silence felt wrong. He asked the staff, but no one had seen her. Panic began to scratch at him, though he tried to bury it beneath his usual arrogance. Then a neighbor approached, hesitant, almost embarrassed, before pointing across the street. And there she was, his daughter, dressed in fine clothes but standing small, her hands outstretched like a beggar. She wasn't asking strangers. She was knocking on the door of the one woman Charles thought he'd erased from their lives, the black maid he had dismissed without thanks or care. The sight cut through him like a blade. A billionaire's daughter reduced to pleading for food. But deeper still was the shame, because she wasn't just seeking food. She was seeking comfort, the kind her father never gave. And she had run back to the very woman he'd cast aside. The maid, surprised but gentle, brought the child inside. Charles froze at the edge of the street, unable to move forward. His pride screamed for him to storm in, to drag his daughter home. But his heart, something he rarely listened to, whispered that this was more than hunger. Then came the stares. Neighbors who had once envied his wealth now watched with quiet judgment. Their whispers carried the weight of every decision he had made, every prejudice he had justified. He had power, yes, but power couldn't shield him from humiliation. Inside the maid's home, his daughter laughed softly. She ate with ease, her face lit with the warmth of belonging. And Charles stood outside, powerless, realizing that what he had lost was not food or status. It was something far more fragile. But the humiliation was only the beginning. For when he finally stepped inside, he saw something that made his chest tighten. The walls of the maid's home were covered with photos. His daughter smiling, playing, being held. Moments of joy he had never been present for. It wasn't just that his child was hungry. It was that she had already chosen where she felt safe. And that choice was not him. And in that moment, Charles knew the real reckoning hadn't even begun. Charles stepped inside, his chest heavy with anger, shame, and something else he couldn't name. The maid turned, surprised to see him standing in her doorway. His daughter sat at her table, crumbs on her lips, her small hands wrapped around a plate that looked far too ordinary for the child of a billionaire. For a moment, time froze. The little girl looked up, not with guilt, not with fear, but with relief. Relief to be in the arms of the very woman her father had dismissed as if she were invisible. And then came the words that cut deeper than any wound. The maid, her voice steady but laced with years of buried hurt, said quietly, "She didn't come here for food. She came here for love." The neighbors outside pressed closer, some whispering, others recording on their phones. Charles felt the weight of their eyes, the judgment, the quiet vindication. For years he had lived untouchable, above reproach. But now, in front of everyone, his empire crumbled. Not in numbers or deals, but in dignity. He wanted to shout, to defend himself, to insist he was still in control. But every word caught in his throat. Because deep down he knew the truth. He had valued money over people, pride over compassion, and now his daughter was teaching him the cost. The maid lifted the child gently, her arms protective, her eyes unflinching as they met his. In that silence, Charles realized this wasn't just about his daughter. It was about every dismissal, every time he reduced someone's worth because of their skin, their status, their struggle, and for the first time, the man who thought he had everything understood what it meant to have nothing. Charles walked home that night with his daughter by his side, but the silence between them was louder than any words. She had found comfort in the arms of someone he had cast away, and no wealth, no status, no pride could erase that truth. For the first time in his life, he realized money could not buy respect, and power could not erase shame. The maid had not shouted at him, had not cursed him, had not sought revenge. Instead, her quiet strength had spoken louder than any accusation. In her presence, he saw what he had been blind to for years. Humanity is not measured in titles, salaries, or skin color. It is measured in dignity, compassion, and love. The world outside would soon forget the whispers, the stares, the humiliation. But Charles could not forget. Because what he had witnessed was not just his own downfall, it was a reflection of a deeper, darker truth that continues to haunt our world. Every day, countless people are dismissed, disrespected, or denied their worth because of the color of their skin. Every day, the same arrogance he once lived by repeats itself in boardrooms, in schools, on streets, and in homes. And so the question remains, not just for Charles, but for all of us. How many more children will grow up learning love from those society devalues? How many more lives will be shattered before we understand that racism is not just someone else's problem? It's ours. Because until we see every person's humanity with equal weight, stories like this one will not be rare. They will be reality.